granniopteryx, she knows the truth, she's linking every link.
Right, we are live, and I am here talking to no less than Max Klinger, who caused quite a storm with a tweet in which he referred to what he learnt in Cambridge as crap. And speaking as something of a Cambridge woman myself, I want to tell you that was like a dagger to the heart. Anyway, and then when I relayed that message, I said it was tweeted. It was a tweet by Max Klinger, and I got a storm of people telling me that Max Klinger doesn't exist. And this is obviously some sort of constructed character. So this fellow here, Max, will you put your hands in front of your face like that?
Yeah, sure. I look better with my hands in front of my face.
There you are, you see, and
Big improvement.
So absolute proof that this is a real human being. And do you know what? Like 5 years ago, mere 5 years, I wouldn't have said this is a real human being. It would have never even entered my mind to have had to say that. All right, Max, will you please introduce yourself now?
Yeah, sure. I'm a real human being, despite my somewhat strange appearance, and I write a Substack on all different sorts of political subjects. Politics, different events around the world. And yeah, that's about it. I'm actually a lawyer by trade, but I spend a lot of my time doing political analysis and writing on my Substack and making videos on YouTube and social media.
Can I ask you what sort of a lawyer?
Yeah, I do mostly commercial work.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's enough. No,
yeah.
So you're not like, the sort that wears the wig and goes into court and
No.
right.
I don't wear a wig, not in public at least.
No, right. Okay. I mean, the original Max, actually he didn't, but he would have done if there'd have been one available. Okay, now, why did you go to university? I'm sure your parents would have been so proud that you got into Cambridge, but you studied what? Sociology?
Yeah, I studied, so it was called Social and Political Sciences back then, and then they changed the name in the middle of it to something else, Politics, Psychology and Sociology, I think, and they changed the faculty name.
PPE? Was that PPE?
PPE was at Oxford, which is a similar thing, but I did
okay,
Social and
sorry.
Political Sciences. No, but it's like basically sociology, and then I specialised in the sociology strand of that.
And how did you get from that to the law?
Because basically, short story is I wanted to be an academic, but as I discussed in my piece and as I've been recently trying to convey to people, despite being, I'm like intellectually minded, and that's what I actually would naturally do in some respects, but there was just too much crap. Like it was just basically obviously the case that in order to be the sort of academic I would have been, like someone looking at sociological stuff or political academia, all that sort of type of academia, you essentially, in 99% of cases, have to be willing to just write ideological activist rubbish and also do it in an unbelievably pretentious and verbose way, which I'm just not minded to do. I'm really like literal minded, and I just say what I think. Essentially, I can't really do what you have to do in order to seem like you're jumping through the hoops in that sort of environment. So it wasn't really possible for me. And then as I got older and older and I kept studying the stuff, my belief system really diverged from that way of thinking. So then the law was more of a kind of academic way of doing a normal job.
Right. So, yeah, you have as far as I can tell, an analytical type of mind. And what was happening in sociology, it's not analytical anymore. It used to be, back in the day, it really was a science. But it just went off the rails very quickly, and you found that very uncomfortable.
Yeah. I'm not certain if it was ever that scientific. That may be the case, but definitely almost a very significant percentage of what I read at university, and also just in general, it's kind of seeps into the mainstream more broadly. But when I did start reading this stuff in a lot of detail, the sort of articles which are taken to be very seminal pieces of work within that sort of field, and also just articles which are taken to be kind of pieces of research you can reference and leverage as evidence in support of your position in new articles, it became really quickly apparent that not only the standard of what's considered proof or hard evidence, but also the ideology there were just so low. The ideology which is intrinsic to the work was just so low caliber and obviously not something which you should kind of take very seriously in a lot of cases. But yeah, it's treated as some of the most profound thinking in the world on that subject.
Yeah.
And then if you add in, it's explicitly political. It's basically what a lot of people really don't understand is that so much of what gets presented as legitimate academic research in these spaces is essentially just activism, just pure ideological activism,
Yes.
and it's almost always progressive.
Yeah.
So that became quite quickly apparent to me.
Yeah. I talked about it being a science because I remember one early on, there was this thing where they were building a public housing of some sort, and they were worried about graffiti. So they consulted sociologists about how to stop people graffitiing. And there was a study done, and it was worthwhile because they realized that when you have these huge, blocky, solid buildings and people who aren't in control of their lives feel that that's just too much and they want to bring it down, so they spray it. So the architect did something that looked a little fragile, and it didn't get sprayed. So at that point, I thought, yeah, the vague memory of that, but I thought, yeah, that's what sociology should be for.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
It's gone off the rails since then. So your ambitions were to be an academic, and
Yeah,
then
sort of.
so, and then you realised that your analytical approach just you'd better stick to law.
Yeah, that's more or less it. Yeah, essentially, it was almost impossible to do it because I wasn't going to be able to just write stuff which I didn't even agree with ideologically, just for the sake of getting the esteem that you get in that field once you do that. I wouldn't be happy to just write, basically progressive, hard left, woke activism in order to have a job. So I was kind of reluctant to do that. And this was a long time ago before things became really hard line
Yeah.
in that way. But it was even very obvious back then. But it was more almost just on the intellectual level, just the theory. So much of the theory in that world is just unbelievably pretentious and is based upon using really, really hard to understand language to make it sound like they're saying something which you need expertise to understand, when essentially you could probably boil it down into one sentence, unless
Yeah.
they haven't got clarity of mind, which often they don't, and they kind of cover that up by just using such, unclear phrasing and terminology. So
Uh-huh.
that was kind of the two main reasons. And then also, I guess the other thing about academia is I've always had a quite broad interest in just generally what's going on in the world around me. So, and I generally come to my conclusions about what I think by just thinking about things as a whole, and I'll be thinking about what takes my interest. Whereas it seemed like in academia, often you have to focus on one really specific thing for ages at a time, which isn't necessarily. I don't think that's how was keen to spend my life focusing obsessively on one small issue too much. So I also like that you could focus on more things than that if you do more like commentary side of things.
Okay. Would you like to um, talk about your Substack? Do you have it to hand? Or...
Yeah, put it with me.
So you say, for one module, I wrote a lengthy essay about how cultural products like kids' cartoons and jazz songs serve as instruments of capitalist oppression. The only time I could imagine that would be if you took a model of Mickey Mouse and beat your kid about the head with it. I got a top mark on that paper, despite knowing at the time I was essentially regurgitating complete crap. Now, isn't that bad for your soul?
Yeah, it is. My the strength with which I hold my belief that it's crap has increased over time.
Yeah,
So to some extent, when I was studying it, because I was still I started university as kind of left wing, and then I was just studying these theories with kind of an open mind. And also, they're just written in such an unclear way that it took me ages to really understand what they were even trying to say. I spent ages and ages summarizing it for myself, to use in my exam. And just that process, you kind of get caught up in the specifics of it. But by the end of that, I kind of had a pretty strong feeling that this stuff was largely just pretentious rubbish, and also um, obviously very ideological. But that my belief in that has significantly grown over time, like since then. But at the time, I still just had a pretty strong feeling that by the time I got to exams, I thought, I mean, I'm going to write this down because this is what I'm studying and this is how you need to get a good grade. But having studied it for an entire year, by the end of the year, I was thinking, oh, I've got serious doubts about this. So that's just an example of one of the things we looked at when I was there.
Have you heard of neuro-linguistic programming?
Yeah,
It
but don't
sounds to me like making you absorb and reproduce this stuff. It's a form of neuro-linguistic program. By the way, I want to say, when I was talking about your soul, I wasn't speaking in any religious sense. I just want to make that clear. But you have a being within yourself, and relaying stuff you don't... lies. Relaying lies is just bad for that, for your sense of yourself. Anyway... could you define this as neuro-linguistic programming?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that's kind of what I'm trying to convey in all the commentary I'm doing on it now, and also with these posts, is that it's not about individual pieces of research necessarily, although there are hilarious and numerous examples of how crazy some of the stuff you study is, which gets held up as really, really profound and high level thinking. But the broader point is just that so much of what goes on in these academic fields, broadly the social sciences, large swathes of the humanities, but also even just across the university system as a whole in general, and also even seeping out from the university system into wider society. But so much of what goes on is basically just activism or the pushing of a particular type of ideological agenda. To the extent that students attend these places, go to lectures, and then more or less get taught the right type of thing to think about the world and the right way to view political events and so on.
Sorry.
That's all right.
That's my horse, by the way. Yeah. Carry on, sorry.
No, that's it. So yeah, I mean, I think it's basically a lot of indoctrination going on within universities and especially within certain fields.
Tell me, is there any way to, I mean, is it solvable? Has it gone too far? Ooh.
It's definitely gone way too far. I think you could definitely make it way better than it is by, at the most basic level, just exposing it to wider public scrutiny and making people more aware of exactly what it is that's getting funded in these sort of places. I mean, just having an awareness of that more broadly in society would make a huge difference, I think. And what I've really realized in the last week or so of talking about this is there's barely anyone else who's actually talking about it, which is really surprising. And I'm getting so many people messaging me saying, oh, thanks so much for talking about this. I've kind of had a feeling that's the case for years, but I've never heard anyone saying it. And it's like, it's so glaringly obvious to me. And you don't really need 10 degrees to understand this. You can just often look at literally the title of what's got funded. So it'll be like, I can't remember specific examples off the top of my head. It'll be like the white supremacist nature of heteronormative pole dancing routine. And then they'll have like 200 grand in funding. And it's one person. And so for example, one thing which was recently received a significant amount of funding, I think, and was like widely treated as a serious piece of research was 5 or so different researchers got people to build Lego models of their own experiences of racism and oppression. And then they wrote up the findings of all these different adults building Lego models. And that's used as proof of the different types of oppression which exist in society. So, okay, maybe you think that's legitimate, but many people, if they just heard about that and then found out as that sort of thing was getting funding, I can't remember if that specific one did, I think it did, but you can times that by thousands of different pieces of research of a similar type of focus. That stuff is getting funding and is treated really seriously and then is used as evidence in other pieces of research.
It's
to prove
quoted
that,
isn't it? Yeah.
Exactly. It just enters our wider mindset. And then the media report, oh, wow, new piece of research shows that, as we all knew, the society we live in is really racist. And the experts say it. So it's just like a huge, crazy, fraudulent grift in many, not all of it, definitely not all of it, but just to such a significant extent that I really want people to understand that.
I have made the comment in answer to comments under my own videos, that they should just sell the education, faculty in Cambridge, and sell the building and use the money to compensate the students who had lectures from, well, not only the one professor who sadly became somewhat in the limelight, but several of them who were talking rubbish. Did you see that video I sent you the link of, the one with the teacher trying to explain to a group of schoolgirls that there's like 5 genders or something?
Oh, yeah, I saw a little clip of that.
So the problem is that it's right down to the teachers in schools now. How do we clean that up? It's you sell the Faculty of Education in Cambridge. That's not. It's a sort of hydra. You cut off one head, there are 8 other heads left, or however many the hydra had.
No, that's definitely true. I mean, I'm constantly trying to push this and make this clear in what I'm talking about. This is not just about Jason Arday. It's not just about that one faculty within Cambridge. It's not about the broader department of the social sciences in Cambridge. It's not about Cambridge specifically, even that. It's not even just about the university system. It's such a wide-ranging thing, this whole ideology.
How do you think this happened? How could it?
It's a complicated one, but the unbelievably simple answer is, I think the West kind of like lost confidence in itself around, I don't know when, but I would assume it started to probably happen around like the 60s or so. Obviously, there were people who hated the West and that sort of general Western belief system before that, but it got quite mainstream to have that kind of anti-Western establishment viewpoint in the 60s or so. And then there was also always a kind of communist element in a lot of different universities, like social sciences department. There were always a few communists, and that kind of communist or left-wing viewpoint was always considered kind of cool, and the kind of elite leftist position was to be vaguely radical. But then I guess with the fall of the Soviet Union, when people stopped being super interested in, or stopped being able to really shill the brutal communism, they took the same basic way of looking at the world, which is just to constantly claim everything's oppressive and always look for the negative at everything about the West and our own societies, and just basically shifted it for a bunch of other different oppressors and oppressed groups, and then they've decided everything else is oppressive in exactly the same way. So that's kind of what happened broadly within the university system, and I think a lot of that was actually spearheaded within the universities, not all of it. But and then it really is, if you had to choose one place that this stuff really comes from, there isn't one big conspiracy, and it's not one specific location, but definitely top of the level of things that seeps this stuff into wider society would be higher education university departments, which have hundreds of researchers pumping this stuff out all the time, and very few people countering that stuff, because it's kind of hard to do social sciences research if you're not pretty woke and progressive, because it's just by definition, I think 90+% of all academics in the social sciences in the UK identify as liberal or progressive, and something like 20 to 30% of all social scientists openly identify as Marxists or radicals, or something like 50% if you include radicals, hard left, and Marxists. Some ridiculous figure. People can check the exact figure online, but it's something like that. So yeah, I just think it's kind of really from the universities that this stuff, a lot of it comes from.
Yeah. So I don't see. Well, how would you suggest we start cleaning this up?
Well, I'm trying to actually get a movement going. I've had quite a lot. I'm trying to get a movement going online, which has actually been surprisingly successful, given that I didn't even really have it in my mind as a specific objective a couple of weeks ago. But just given the unbelievable levels of public attention and feedback to this one article, I've kind of got a bit of a movement going of people starting to speak out within these departments and within universities, like academics who have felt that they're not able to talk about this stuff, or that there's no real outlet to express their frustration at the situation on their departments if they don't share that very narrow progressive worldview.
But if you say that most of them appear to be radical left, Marxist or whatever, so why would they want to speak up? This is directly against their
Yeah.
living, isn't it?
No, you're absolutely 100% right about that. But there are still some people in those institutions who are uncomfortable with what's going on and have been kind of unable to express themselves. And I do also think there's kind of a tendency when there is one kind of established, acceptable set of beliefs, and there's a very vocal minority or majority of people really, really trying to morally push a certain type of morality and belief system on everyone else, other people kind of feel intimidated into silence, and it's kind of a snowballing effect. But when a few people start speaking out, it's harder for that to be enforced as much. So I think people speaking out would be helpful. Wider focus on this in broader public discourse and attention on what is getting the funding, what is this stuff which is actually being reported. If the BBC reports, like, as they routinely do, or all these other news outlets.
BBC, I used to work for the BBC. And it's as bad as the universities. Worse.
Exactly, yeah.
Worse.
Yeah, no, I actually think the BBC is kind of worse in a way because people just read it in their millions and think it's objective.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's kind of true of universities, but fewer people read the stuff. But basically, I think a focus on how that's all operating would be important.
Okay, well, we've got like 5 minutes left, Max. Is there anything that you really feel like you should be, a message you should be putting out now?
I think the message I'm trying to get out to people at the moment, to the extent there is one, is that what's going on is kind of a prime example of credentialism as well. That's something which people don't realize is in. It's very what I mean by that is there's a reliance on these kind of credentials of the people who are putting out this research. They get so much esteem. If you've got a job as a Cambridge professor, no one else is seen as legitimate when they question what you're saying. So if you have a debate with someone about something and you're saying, I don't think society is systemically oppressive, and they say, well, I'm a Cambridge professor and I'm telling you it is, then people just feel, the average person who's listening to that is like, well, look at that idiot arguing with the expert professor who's obviously a genius, which isn't true. And so it's you can argue back against this stuff by just literally using common sense, but also I'd say so you don't have to fall for that kind of credentialism, but also more broadly for people to understand that so much of what comes out of these places, it gets presented like it's objective fact almost, and it's not. It's just pseudoscience with a clear ideological agenda. So trust your instinct on it, and also start looking in detail behind. When you read a media report and it says, or when you hear a politician saying this stuff, or all these activists online saying things like, well, as we know from a recent study, XYZ is incredibly oppressive. Think, like, what did that study say? Look it up. Look at what the people who wrote the study actually do, what their other research interests are. Check what it says, and it will usually be something like, 5 people built a Lego model which showed that there was oppression in the school system. So it's like, okay, you can just see through the house of cards if you have an analytical mindset.
To finish with, seeing as you appear to be starting some sort of a movement, you must tell everyone how to get in touch with you. I can put it on the in the description, but maybe you should say something now as well.
Yeah, please do. So you can follow me on Instagram, which is just at Max Klinger Politics, my name. On Twitter, I'm Max Klinger, but for some reason my handle is Max E2 Review, because I used to have a podcast called E2 Review, but just look up Max Klinger and I'll come up on Twitter as well. And on my Substack, and I'm on TikTok as well, but on my Substack, it's maxthinks.substack.com. But basically, if you just type in Max Klinger's Substack, it'll come up there, and follow me on there. Substack's where you get like the good quality content, basically, and the other platforms I use all the time, but it's more, stuff which I've basically written on the Substack, and then I'm repurposing it for the other platforms. So any of those which take your interest, just follow me there.
Okay. All right.
Oh, and I have a YouTube channel. You can follow me there as well.
Yeah. Oh,
Max
you've got the
Klinger
YouTube
Politics.
channel. Is it Max Klinger as well?
It's Max Klinger Politics, I think.
Okay. You're not sure.
I need to check, but it's getting loads of views on this recent video.
Yeah, you have to email me with all of this so I've got it right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I will.
All right, and then it'll be in the description somewhere.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Well, I'll say, Max, it's been a real pleasure talking to you, and it's lovely to see that all is not lost.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, it's great to talk to you, and thanks for having me on, and thanks for your video as well, which about my post, which I've seen
Oh,
has been getting loads of
it
views.
was, yeah, it was perfect. Just what
Yeah,
I
it's great.
wanted. Okay, well, I hope we'll speak again. But until then, everybody remember the Substack. It really is very informative. Okay, Max, thank you.
Thanks.
Bye bye. You can help my channel by subscribing and clicking the notification bell. That's quite important. And by sharing if you're so inclined. Links to my other channels and to donation methods are in the description. But the best way you can help is simply by clicking like and notify. Thank you.